it really does take a gratitude and a humility to keep, I would say, attracting wonderful mentors and people that will invest in you, their knowledge. Because again, I know how much it costs to learn this stuff in real estate. I know how hard it is. And I know I didn't bring a lot to the table. So if I can just humbly serve, if I can clean the garbage out of the house, clean the needles out of the houses, if I can stay up late and find them, if I can create, manage the crews, make the calls, whatever his problems were, I just take notes because this guy doesn't ask for help ever. He will not ask for help. But if I can listen to his problems and make his life easier, he might keep me around. And so I want to just encourage your listeners that, again, there's really not a mentor you can't have if you find a way to make their life easier.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast. Sean and Lacey here with you, just as we are each and every week. And oh my gosh, are you in for an absolute treat this particular week? This is a guest that we have been fighting to get on the show for years, a couple of years now. I remember when we first did our very first experiential mastermind on Buck Island. Didn't really know. It was coming out of COVID, lots of tests and all of this. And when we got there, they were like, the owner of the island is here. And then she would like to have dinner with the group. And we were like, oh, that's great. And we end up sitting next to her. And she was like, maybe I could share my story with the group. And so she then gets us all together and shares her story. And I got to tell you, so many people were saying that was like the highlight.
Well, I was going to say, there was a lot of moving moments that occurred throughout that trip. And a lot of people really found and worked through some things through themselves, and they were empowered. But this was one of those pivotal moments for the majority of our guests.
So we didn't want to make the entire world have to go all the way to her island, although you should, to hear the story. And so we wanted her on the podcast. Let's bring in Britnie Turner to the None of Your Business podcast. Britnie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Well, this first question, if you don't know this, we ask every guest this first question. But this first question, we probably just ask this question and
that's the show.
And that's the show. We'll see what happens. But here's what happens when somebody meets Britnie Turner and hears her speaking on her podcast or on someone else's podcast. It's super easy for people to fall into this, oh, well, that's Britnie. I mean, she's lucky. She probably had help from her parents. And I wish that everything went
She has
my
something
way.
I don't.
Yes, yeah. I wish everything went how it did for her. And so we ask every single guest this because we've come to find out that so far, unless you're the exception, which I already know she's not the exception, but unless you're the exception, all of us have this twisty, turny way to get to where we are. And we've had to grind and fight for what we really believe in. So the first question that we ask everybody is, how do you end up being Britnie Turner, this person who's doing so much stuff all around the world? Tell us a little bit about what that journey's been like for you.
Well, I want to encourage your listeners to know that I was born Britnie Turner and I'm going to die Britnie Turner. And the assets I own and don't own or lose or whatever happens in my life doesn't make me more or less valuable. And I think that's a really important place to start because you can lose it all in a day. We do a lot of disaster response all over the world with my nonprofit. And I've seen people who own everything own nothing in minutes. And so when you come from that place of knowing you're enough, no matter how much you do or do not do, then you can have peace on the journey. And my journey was riddled with issues from the beginning. I was not the right gender. I'm not the right age. I'm not the right whatever to do the things that I've done. And having a why that's so much bigger than me has been my driving force to be able to overcome every obstacle, most of them being people just not believing in the vision that I had. And so my journey started out with being one of 6 kids, homeschooled, raised on a farm, and very sheltered. But something happened at 12. My grandmother showed the whole family, I don't know why, because we were super sheltered, this video about sex trafficking. And it was horrible. Obviously, broke my heart into smithereens, as if you really understand what that issue is doing, it should break your heart into smithereens. And this documentary ends with like 50 girls dying in a container in the middle of the ocean. And what I realized at that moment was how many important things there are going on in the world. And if I just chose to apply myself, then I could do something about this suffering. We did not grow up rich at all. We grow up, I would say America poor. But we had a roof over our head and we had food. But I knew that I lived in a country where if I tried, I could make a way for people who had nothing. And that's not like a welfare system at all. It's literally having the resources to be able to fight in the good fights, and or to be able to have an abundance that means I can take care of more problems than just myself and my family. And so that was me at 12. And so I started down the journey of like, well, how do I really start putting a dent into this issue? And I start, the little bit of research you could do without like dial-up internet back in the woods where we were, was that, okay, well, they have a lot of problems in certain places in Africa. So my life purpose began with thinking that I would be a missionary in Africa and I would save kids out there. And so from 12 on, I would go on these, I would work 5 jobs at a time and save up all my money because our friends were too poor to like ask them to donate to sponsor our trips. So I would work 5 jobs at a time to go on these trips every summer. And I went all over the world. And the problem was I would just get more and more pissed off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're supposed to be having these like holy moments, Britney, where the sun's coming down, you're holding the baby, you've got the long skirt on, the light's shining, the flies are flying, all the things. But instead, you're just sitting here angry. I'm like, yeah, you're the worst missionary. And it wasn't that I was just angry to be angry. I was angry because we weren't actually fixing the problem. And so I dedicated my life, because I'd get more and more frustrated, to actually finding solves. How do you actually fix the problem at its root? And so at 17, I went through a survival school led by Green Berets and Australian survivalists and all these different things. And their final culmination exercise at the end of the year was they just dumped us off in this like 8 hours away from normal civilization village up in Costa Rica and said, find a way to create value. And so I was like, okay, like help people out here. And so about 3 days went by and I decided we should put on a women's conference. And at the very end, we had the opportunity to like pray over everybody. And the very last little girl, I asked her name and she couldn't speak. And so I asked her again. And then after a while, it got awkward and I asked the translator, I said, what's going on? And I found out that this girl, who she's now 8 years old, as an infant had been so horrifically sexually abused that it destroyed her vocal cords. The fear, the hopelessness was like a darkness in her eyes. And I will never forget that look on her face. And I was taken to a different level of anger at that point, as most people would, I think, if they met an innocent child that had suffered such a terrible atrocity. And then I found out that it was the girl's father that had done that. And then I found out that 1 out of every 4 children in this specific village didn't make it past 1 year old from sexual abuse and trauma. And I went back to my tent that night and I got on my knees and I said, God, whatever it looks like, I want to be the one that comes back and actually does something about this. And I heard loud and clear, I'm going to take you out of business. I'm going to take you out of the mission field and I'm going to put you in business. And I was like, no. So immediately, as soon as I get this amazing download, I start arguing it. So don't think that I'm just this amazing, inspired person that just does whatever God says. And it's like, no, it's normally sometimes something you don't want to do or haven't thought of before. And I had it in my mind that rich people are evil. Thanks a
Right.
lot, Disney, Cruella de Vil, Beauty and the Beast. Rich people were always the bad guys in all these movies I grew up on. And so I just didn't really want to have anything to do with it. But this rich guy was teaching at my school. He was talking about the principles of rich dad, poor dad. And he said, did you know you can buy a house with no money down? And if your mortgage payment is $900 a month, but you rent it out for $1,200 a month, you get to keep that $300. That's a thing called cash flow. And I was like, go on.
I'm intrigued.
Intrigued. He said, do that 10 times and you can be a missionary in Africa or whatever you feel called to do. And you don't have to ask anybody for money. And I was like, I really like this idea. So it's year 2007, right? Great time to get into real estate. And I Googled what colleges teach you how to flip houses. You guys know the best university back then that would teach how to flip
Hard
houses?
Knocks? The University of Hard Knocks? I don't know.
Exactly. Well, I'm very practical, so I just Googled it. I spent like 2 weeks trying to find one. And I was
Right.
like, I guess I've got to learn another way. I don't know if y'all have ever done anything that your parents aren't necessarily a fan of.
Yeah. Every day of my life.
Yeah, my family was not cool with not going to college. It was not cool back then. It's very accepted now. Kids today would never understand, but this was not an acceptable route. But I was like, but they don't teach what I want to learn. They're like, so? And I was like, so why would I go? And they're like, it's just what you do. And I'm like, why? But that's a question, we got to ask ourselves. That's just what you do. But why? So for our listeners, start questioning things. Just because you grew up around people who this is their path, that doesn't mean it's your path. And so I know that I'm following God. Therefore, the doors should open, right? This is what's in my head. And I'm going to tell you this level of detail because I want to encourage people who think like I did. You don't have to, I don't care what you believe it. I'm just telling you this was my journey. I can't tell the story another way. But I thought because I had a holy endeavor that the door should just open. The Red Sea shall part or whatever. And, I was raised that if you hit obstacles, it must not be God's plan. And I want to debunk that myth right now because you're going to hit obstacles because it's never been done before. It's difficult. Evil is organized or you just don't know what the heck you're doing. You're freaking new at it. So it just seems harder than it probably is. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't take some things as signs that you're not supposed to do it just because you're scared. Just keep going. If it's worth pursuing, it's probably going to be difficult. You don't want to attract that, but it's okay. It doesn't mean anything. So I get into trying to learn how to flip houses. I call all the We Buy Houses signs and say, can I work for you for free? And they would start screaming, get out of the market now. This was year 2008. And I was like, why? All these books I'm reading say that you can get really rich in real estate in like 6 months. And I didn't watch, we grew up without TV. So we never had it. So I didn't know there's a global economic meltdown going on sponsored by real estate. And
Right.
so, yeah, everything I touched basically just failed. I was a failure for almost 3 years, but I had bought my first house at 18 years old, right before I decided to go into real estate investing. Even in the process of buying it, I learned about a thing called flipping houses, which, buy a crappy house, put a bunch of hard work into it, and you can make $10,000, which is $1 billion to an 18-year-old who wants to be a missionary. And so, save up those chunks of $10,000. You've got $100,000. That's a down payment on an apartment complex. And then you can make $10,000 a month. You can build your own freaking orphanages. And what I loved about that idea of little 18-year-old Britney's brain, because my thought was, how can I make enough money to where I'm not beholden to anybody else?
Mhm.
I have met so many women staying in abusive relationships because they don't believe that they can ever provide for themselves financially. I have met so many people stuck, thinking I've got to suck up to this person. I've got to take this level of treatment because they really don't think they can ever make it on their own. And the point is, may nobody ever be able to cap your calling. May nobody ever be able to block you from the thing that you are supposed to do. Now, once you've gotten in line with your cause and you start doing it, it does probably need to be scaled, and you're going to want and need to work with other people. But we have a very strict NAP policy, a no a-holes policy in our life. I don't have to put up with any a-holes at all, ever, never. We just don't do it. We don't treat people that way, and we're not going to be treated that way. I've got
That
one
policy,
life.
I love it.
I'm not putting up with it. Like, I just want to work with wonderful people and wonderful things. So anyway, that was the brilliance in little 18-year-old Britney's brain. But I had no idea how difficult the journey was going to be. So everybody told me I was going to be a failure forever. Family stopped talking to me for about 2 years. I ended up having to wait tables at the Cheesecake Factory. And I would study 12 hours a day, any real estate book I could get my hands on. And I remember one day I was trying to like peer pressure God into showing up for me. I don't know if anybody's ever done that. It's like, I need to make $350 to pay my mortgage because my roommates are, I'm like, I live in the room next to you. I know if you haven't paid, but they
Right.
haven't paid me. And I'm like almost on day 5 for that mortgage payment being late. So I'm trying to like say it's going to happen. I'm working a double. At the end of that shift, a 9-hour shift, I had made $7 in change. And I was like, I've never been stiffed so many times in my life. I was like, God, why am I here? I threw my hands on my Cheesecake Factory apron, and my apron's full of books, like all these real estate books that just trying to desperately learn like how to do this. I said, God, why am I here? I'm smarter than this. And I heard loud and clear, because I want to bless you. And I'm like, really? Really? Because it sure doesn't look like it. And I went up to the host and I said, please send me home. And he's like, it's not your turn. And I'm very pushy when I need to be. And I was like, send me home. And so I finally get cut. And right as he said I can go home, these 2 guys and a girl walk in. And I said, please give me that table. And he said, it's not your turn. I'm like, give me the table. I don't care if I'm here for 5 more hours and I only make $5. Like, I really need at least $5. And so he gave me the table. I'm telling you these details because so many times we can get lost in our victimness that we're hanging our head and we don't see the miracle right in front of us. Had I not looked up and seen these 2 guys and a girl walking into the Cheesecake Factory, I would not be sitting here talking to you today. And so I asked for that table. I got him. And the guy sitting farthest away from me on his wedding ring finger had the logo of a house. And I said, are you real estate investors? And he said, why, yes, we are. I said, I'm going to be a real estate investor someday. And they're like, okay, sweetie, you probably are reading Cosmo Girl magazine. And I said, actually, I'm reading Success magazine. And they're like, okay. Well, you're probably listening to Hanson on CD in your car. Y'all remember? Bop. And he said, actually, I'm listening to Think and Grow Rich, the audiobook. And they continue to ask me what I now understand is pretty sexist questions. But I didn't care. I was just so excited to be in the room with people that were doing what I want to do, because all the signs I would call, those We Buy Houses signs were running for the hills.
Yeah.
And I was so self-trained and so self-taught at that point. It's kind of what Oprah says is there's no such thing as luck. It's simply opportunity meeting hard work. And so I had been, studying 12 hours a day, and they were so impressed with like all the things I'd known. They said, well, we put on conferences. If you want to come to one, we would love to have you. And I said, that would be great. And so I ended up going to a conference, and one of the best tips I can share with your listeners is, besides not getting lost in your victimness when everything in your life seems to be going wrong, sometimes it's just a better soundbite for your book. Just remember, it's going to be a dang good soundbite for your book later. But I went to this conference, and I remember it's kind of like I just innately understood, if I could be in the room, if I could be sitting next to people who were doing what I want to do, that will like osmosis become me. I don't know why. I just knew that you do become the people you surround yourself with. And so, find a way to get in the room. Find a way to be around this group. What an amazing group of people that host amazing events and are making a podcast to elevate you. They did not tell me to promote this. I'm just telling you guys, like, I've spent time with them, and the kinds of things that they talk about cannot help but elevate you and your dreams and your future. The kinds of people that they go to an island with, I'm telling you, it's just impactful work. And so applaud yourself for even being on this podcast, finding this and listening to it. But there is something about getting in proximity to those people. And so I found the speakers at the conference and I asked one of them, I said, can I take you to lunch? Now, I knew I had X amount of dollars left available on my credit card. And so I was hoping that my card would still go through and it wouldn't be completely maxed out. And this speaker ended up inviting like 12 other speakers. And I was like, they're like ordering wine and all this stuff. I tried not to be distracted by, my card is going to bounce. I was like, it's just somehow we're going to make it through this. I was still present enough to overhear the guy sitting at the end of the table talking about how he's got all these deals stacking up. And if only he had an assistant that he could teach how to run projects, and he could keep speaking all over the world and selling his courses. And I was like, me, I'll be your assistant. And he's like, do you have any assistant experience? And I was like, trying to, pull from my waitressing background and like, these are the same skills. And they weren't. But anyway, I talked him into hiring me as his assistant. He said, we got to move to this place called Nashville in the next 2 weeks. I had been living in Charlotte. I didn't know anybody. Moved up there in a hope and a prayer, 6 hours away from family. I'm like, this is it. This is my big break. I'm going to make it. It's going to be amazing. God has opened the door. I'm finally going to be successful. At this point, I'm about $45,000 in credit card debt because I had tried to be a loan officer and not one loan closed in 2 years. So that was a terrible time to try to be a loan officer. And that $45,000 might as well have been $45 billion of debt. That was so stressful for me. So I took the job. That was $600. I paid a month, $600 less than the minimums on my credit cards. Again, moved 6 hours away from family. Don't know anybody up there. And I start working for this guy. And again, believing this is my big break, I rent out my house to these guys off of Craigslist. This is going to go well. And their first month's rent check bounces. The first month. They've already moved in. And this is back when I used to believe tenants and all their hardship stories. You learn on that one.
Yeah, yes,
So
you do.
sad story about his daughter being sick. And meanwhile, they're having parties and doing tons of drugs and trashing the house. So I've got them I need to evict. Within 60 days, they fire me and say, nobody's buying real estate anymore. Nobody even wants to learn about it because the economy is so bad. But the day I got fired was the day he was hosting a conference, and these two loud as heck guys were up front bragging about all these deals that they were flipping. And I went up to them and I said, can I work for you for free? And
For free.
For free. One of the most important things I can point out that I think was a wise move on my part as like a 21-year-old girl at this point, may have been 20, I was right around there, was I knew that I had to find a way to create value. And I knew that I could work to learn, not just to earn. And
Mhm.
there's so many entitled people like this. I deserve this. I deserve. You don't deserve jack diddly freaking squat.
Mhm.
Nobody owes you anything. You can create value, and that pay will follow. So find a way to be of value. And so it took almost 3 months to finally get in the car with Polly, this guy named Polly and Dr. Phil. Very loud, kind of crazy guys. And he made me meet him at 5 in the morning. And I was living, so back up. When I got fired, I didn't have anywhere to go. I had to move into my car.
Oh.
So I'm now working for free for these guys. I'd been working in a basement doing paperwork for 3 months to get one meeting with Polly, and he made me meet at 5 a.m. And I went and bought muffins so that I could like maybe he's hungry. Like this. And this guy did not talk to me the whole day. He just went on, and I'm just listening to all his problems, and I'm just taking notes. He's like chewing out contractors, can't do this, da, 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 da. And at the end of the day, he finally looks at me and he's like, "Why do you want to do this anyway?" And I told him about I basically need the money to go save kids from sex trafficking. And he goes, "I'm going to make you the best." And so for the next 9 months, I worked for free for them and secretly lived in my car, which wasn't like that many hours a day because we worked 18 to 21 hours a day every day. It was insane.
Mhm.
So I wasn't in my car that many hours, but it was a lot. And I made them almost $400,000. And at the very end, I said, "Hey, can we actually partner on this one?" The realtor commission 6 grand. The property makes 45,000. Realtor commission 6 grand. I'll throw that in. I found it. I found all the money for it. I'll manage the contractors. I just want $5,000. He had to think about it for 3 days.
Oh my goodness.
He had to think about it for 3 days. And I was like, "All right, please." He said, "Okay, let's do that." House is in a flood zone. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. But when that house closed, it made less money. I got $3,000 instead of 5,000. And of that, I remember I was negative $838 in my bank account that day. And I spent $2,000 of that $3,000 to send them and their wives on a cruise to say, "Thank you for being the first people to ever believe in me." And I brought my bank account up to zero and I was off to the friggin' races. And so
Nice.
it really does take a gratitude and a humility to keep, I would say, attracting wonderful mentors
Mm.
and people that will invest in you their knowledge. Because again, I know how much it costs to learn this stuff in real estate. I know how hard it is, and I know I didn't bring a lot to the table. So if I can just humbly serve, if I can clean the garbage out of the house, clean the needles out of the houses, if I can stay up late and find them, if I can create, manage the crews, make the calls, whatever his problems were, I just take notes because this guy doesn't ask for help ever. He will not ask for help. But if I can listen to his problems and make his life easier, he might keep me around. And
Mhm.
so I want to just encourage these your listeners that again, there's really not a mentor you can't have if you find a way to make their life easier and to
So
be of
true.
service and to not be like, "Well, you owe me this." A lot of people ask, "Well, aren't you mad they never paid you and you made that much money?" I was like, absolutely not. I'm
Mhm.
like a gazillionaire now because they gave me a start and no one ever did.
Mhm.
And I really didn't deserve one. I just happened to find a way to create that service. So after that house closed, I struggled. I mean, there's never not been a struggle. So when I tell you these, just to speed up the story, points, they sound great, but they're riddled with problems. Every single house you ever do will take a piece of your soul. It's a rehab. And so the next year, I became the biggest rehabber in Nashville. And then the next year, I became the largest infill developer in Nashville. And then soon after that, I won the Forbes sixth fastest growing woman owned and woman led company in the whole world.
Mhm.
And that is a little bit of my background. Your first question.
I love it. There's so many like gold nuggets that you dropped in there. I kind of don't no, I know where to start. I lie. I do know where to start because you said something that really stuck out to me. And I have conversations like this with clients all the time. But you said you can't let anybody cap your calling. And I love that. And what I notice is that oftentimes it's not even though other people may not believe in you, or they don't believe in what you're doing because they don't understand it, or they don't think it's possible. What I find with a lot of people, it's not other people that cap their calling, it's themselves that cap their calling.
Mhm.
And so, what advice or what things have you learned along your journey? Because it sounds like from very early on, you understood that why, and you didn't ever cap your own calling. Like, how can somebody be encouraged to get out of their own way? Because that's the most detrimental thing that can happen.
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to know that you really are here for a reason. I believe you do have a divine calling. And if you don't know what that is, that a clue is that it will take you to heightened levels of anger or sadness. And
Mm,
I can ask people in just a couple of seconds, like, what makes you more upset than anything in the world when you hear about it? Could be child abuse, could be, you know, something about animals, the environment, whatever. And it's not one is not more holy than the other. We only have a grace to deal with the thing that we're called to deal with. But you should find other people that are working on the same issues so that way you can do it together. And so if you understand that you're powerful beyond measure, you're called to do important things, life is more than just escaping or living for
mhm,
yourself. You really are part of something bigger than you. Then you can do anything. And I have really designed the island to be a place where people find themselves, not a place of escape, which a lot of places to vacation are just to get away, get away, get away. And it's like, no, come here to find yourself. Come here to tap into a deeper meaning, and to get centered. Because I've gone on trips all over the world now, and I've seen some really worthy causes, and I realize it's so much more than anything I could ever do myself. And so how do we raise up what I call the force for good,
mhm,
which is that part of you that is so hungry to be alive, so hungry to have meaning and fulfillment. Like, that is available to you. And so what I love about the people listening to this podcast is one of the best things you can do is stabilize your life, is to have a wealth and an abundance that allows yourself to be able to give without it hurting your family,
mhm,
and to get your health in alignment to where you're not distracted by illness or sickness. You're not giving into your addictions. You're dealing with your demons so that you can be helpful and you can actually have that fulfillment. And so um, that's really my answer, is knowing you're part of something, knowing what that is, trying to take the time to discover what it is. And one of my best tips for figuring it out is to write your eulogy.
mm,
Because if you actually write your eulogy, you get all the should out of you. You get all the should
mm,
out of you.
mhm.
I should be learning Spanish. I should be a better this. I should be. No, what actually matters to you?
Right.
And when you're, imagining your ghosting it up at your funeral, what's the story that made you proud of your life? Not
Mm,
your aunt or your cousin or your sister or your friend or your community. What mattered to you? And that's why every company I've ever owned is named Ariel. And that means to keep the big picture in mind,
mm,
remembering this is bigger than you, to have that ultimate perspective on your life versus today's obstacle or adventure. Every high
mm,
and low, this too shall pass. So how do you remember what matters most? And I've had to have a whole bunch of strategies of keeping that perspective alive, because there's just been so many dang obstacles. And you're like, I'm constantly like, why am I doing this? And it's like, because. And then now that my team is rescuing kids from sex trafficking, which is like so amazing and so rewarding and so fulfilling, um, we got to scale it. And so it's like, but it took from 12 to, when did we really start? We really started rescuing kids at 32 years old. So it took 20 years for me to have my life, my businesses, my network, my education, my health, everything in place to live the dream that I've wanted to, and I've woken up and I breathe for every day. And so, are you dedicated are you that dedicated to the thing that you want to make change in your life?
Let's fill in a gap. Very important. God took you out of the mission, put you into business so that you could go back to the mission.
Yeah.
You've mentioned the island. Bridge that gap from Nashville to an island. How do you just were looking in Rob Report and bought an island one day?
No,
How does that happen?
I wish. I'm not that fancy, guys. So I go from living in my car to winning that Forbes amazing award in like 7 years. And what happened was I kept going on these trips every summer. And I went with my mentor. We were touring one of our orphanages. So until you can like have your own thing and like fund your own nonprofit or whatever, know that every dollar you spend is investing, because money is simply an expansion tool of the heart. And whatever it touches, it expands. So it won't change you. It just reveals you. And so find another cause to donate to or invest in as you're building up yours to be able to then have your own nonprofit if that's part of something you want to do. And so I would find different orgs that I aligned with and I would donate to them. So one of them was an orphanage in Kenya. And so we we toured it, and we were going to the second orphanage site. And I remember I was like 24 at the time. And I remember going over there and being like, I have no value. I can't help anybody. Pretty hard on myself. And we visit the orphanage. I remember meeting these kids that I was doing a craft with. And these, we drive through all these garbage heaps and we pull into these beautiful gates. And it was like so beautiful inside. And I immediately judged it. I was like, wow, it's too nice. I guess I'm a judgy person. It's too nice. We could be helping more kids if we weren't spending this amount of money on landscaping here. And then I get to do this craft with the kids, and I had them draw a picture of their future. And this one little girl, she's about 6 years old, she drew herself as the president of Kenya, holding the hand of her loving husband. And she had her like little mud house, which is like a beautiful mansion to her. And they had an aggressive amount of sheep in the picture, which means she's rich. So I asked, I said, is this like one of the key leaders here's kids? Like, where did she come from? Because she's really dreaming big. And they said, we actually just pulled her out of the garbage heaps last year. And I said, what? And they said, yeah, both her parents died. And she's been being raped. They've died of AIDS. And then she's been being raped, and her brother's been being raped since they were 2 and 3 years old. And we just got her out of there last year. And so she's a real orphan. And what I found was the power of environment. Mm-hmm. And what we were pouring into these kids gave her not only the ability to dream of a beautiful future, because she now has a beautiful environment around her, but she believed she was worthy of that. Mm-hmm. And so environment really does matter for people who like live in a messy house or, have junk all around. Do your best. Be a good steward of what you have, and find inspiring places to live and to be, and like go to the island, like spend time around people that are going to inspire you. So I left that orphanage, which had its own cow farm, chicken farm, vegetable garden. They were teaching the kids skills, feeding them, and also had extra they were selling in the marketplace. And we went down an 8-hour drive to the next potential orphanage site. Now I'm being all hard on myself because I don't have any medical training. I didn't really know how it's going to be a blessing over there, but I just was still on the trip. And that 8 hours we passed slum after slum after slum. And there's one that is a 2 million person slum. And I was like, just this one road would take lifetimes to fix up. And we went to the next potential orphanage site, and we picked that one because every 3 months, these traffickers come through and offer to buy your kids to the local villagers. And they would typically buy them for $25. And, I met a mom. She looks like she's 14. She's older than that, but she had like 9 kids, and she had just sold her 2-year-old for $25 the month before. is they just had nothing. There's, we really take for granted our credit system here in America. You're drowning. You don't have to do that level of desperation kind of thing most of the time, because you can open up another credit card. Now, I'm not recommending people do that, but I'm telling you, do that before you sell your kid for sure. So we picked this area, and then I helped them do the land deal. And then I helped them do the site plan on how we would, recreate a family model versus warehouse children. And we'd buy enough land to where we could have a cow farm, chicken farm, vegetable garden, and eventually have enough outgoing that we could cover the overhead instead of continue to ask people for donations. And then, so on and so forth. And I didn't realize at the time, like, how much of my real estate skills weren't just for building up cash flow so I was free, but I was helping to design a region that was going to bring all this hope to a completely hopeless place. Well, we came back a year later, and it was the weirdest thing. Like, we hadn't even broken ground because it takes forever to get title in Kenya. And surrounding our property was all these businesses, all these little village pop-ups. And it was like this bustling, like, little town around our site. And it was like an orphanage site. I was like, what is going on? And they said, well, the locals figured that if Americans are investing here, that there must be something really special about this place. And I was like, we're building an orphanage. But the point of that is, that's the power of hope, is when you have a vision for a place and you can get people to believe in it, then the economy essentially just grows, because there's so much opportunity. There's so much abundance available if people will just create these jobs. And so that whole village, nobody had to sell their kids ever again because everybody had jobs, which was amazing. And so I went back to America and I said, God, how do I go from doing what I'm doing here in America, which is like fixing up houses or building new ones, to developing Africa? Because that's my plan. And I heard loud and clear, start on islands. I was like, islands? What? Islands? I'm best known over here. Like, I'd practice to be able to go overseas and do these difficult places.
Yeah.
I'm best known for developing Murder Acre, Stab City. Like, I will go actually move into it, plant myself there, and develop the whole area. And so, I'm fine with the crime, like all the issues. To how do you truly transform and mindfully revitalize an area versus just gentrify? They're very different things.
Huh.
And so I heard start on islands. I was like, islands? That's a very weird idea. And so I dug into it, and the vision became, how can you find an island near an area that needs help? But it's a place that, again, especially Americans, because Americans have just so much access. Mm-hmm. They can wake up. You have an isolated area, an immersive place that people come and they wake up and they realize how powerful they are, how important they are. And they not only connect to their purpose, but they connect to each other, and they want to go do other important things. Because I just saw this vision of like people coming in and then being able to go out and tackle all these different problems, all these different causes, not just one. And so I was like, that's a weird idea, but it was layer upon layer of how you can empower the local economy, use sustainable things, create jobs in the bringing to life and the constant operations. And like, this amazing vision came to life, and I thought it'd be an island off of Haiti, somewhere like that. And so I spent a year after I'd really mapped out how you'd use an island to change the world. And I spent a year looking off of Haiti and trying to kick the door open, because I'm a kick the door open kind of person. And and it never happened. And so I remember that one of the only famous people I ever wanted to meet, because I don't know many famous people because I don't watch TV, was Richard Branson. And the reason I wanted to meet him, it's very simple, was because he's a billionaire and not pretentious. He's just cool. And I just still, in the back of my mind, I just can't stand pretentious people. If you haven't figured that out, I don't like it. We are all God's children. We are all valuable. So to act like you're better than somebody else, I'm not cool with. And so I had been going to Necker since I was 24. It's its own long story. And spending time being around Richard Branson and other great minds, I didn't know that what was going on in my subconscious was it was normalizing owning an island. I actually didn't even know that, which was interesting. Again, you got to be careful who you spend time with. And so I had gotten married that summer pretty quickly to somebody who I thought was just absolutely amazing. And for his 30th birthday, I took him to Necker. And that trip, I said, Richard, what's the hardest thing about buying an island? Because I'd been like thinking about it for a year. He said, you can get an island for cheap, but the infrastructure costs hundreds of millions of dollars and decades to bring to life. And I was like, okay. So I had some island on my vision board. Be careful what's on your vision board, people. That, I would move to when I'm like 70, because the BVI is too nice. It doesn't need any help, especially from me. Like, I'm going to move to Haiti. I'm going to live amongst people. Like, that's my plan. And for fun, I said, let's go look at that island that's on the vision board. It takes 3 days to get a hold of the agent. Realtors, listen up. You're going to be rich beyond your wildest dreams if you just answer your freaking phone.
Yeah.
Okay? Just do it.
Easy lesson.
Seriously, just a quick side note. Just answer your phone. So she finally answers and is like, why do you want to buy an island? And I said, in that moment, because I was just faking it, because this is a $50 million island. Like, I was not going to buy in the BVI. But in that moment, the plan I had spent over 100 hours mapping out how to use an island to change the world from a year ago, that vision came out of my mouth. And she said, nothing. And I was like, are you there? And she finally unmuted herself and she was screaming. And she says, you're supposed to buy this island. You're supposed to buy this island. And I said, Ginger. And she said, no, Buck Island. And I literally was like, hate the name. Like, so horrible of me, guys. Like, so stupid. This is how negative I think I am. Like, God. It's like, no. Anyway, she sends a helicopter. We leave Necker. And I'm like, bye, peasants. Great way to leave an island, just saying. It's baller status. And so I go fly around looking at these 3 different islands that were for sale in BVI. And I go to land on the last one, which is Buck Island. And as we're landing, this truck comes down the hill. And I'm like, that truck's on my vision board. It's weird. It's like a 1969 Land Rover. It was so cool. And gets picked up, gets taken up to the top of the hill. And the agent gets there like 2 hours later. Now I'm walking around. This building hasn't been lived in 5 years, but it's this really cool, old, dark castle. And the agent gets there 2 hours later and goes, did your last name used to be Turner? And I said, yeah. And she said, the seller actually knows who you are. And I was like, what the? I'm so far away. Ends up that little tiny school that I learned. Did you know if you buy a house with no money down, you can rent it out. I've been going back there every year and teaching the next class on how you can basically develop yourself, how to learn how to invest so that you can cash flow the God call on your heart. And so that's something I've gone back every single year. And this woman goes to the same, it's a church school and like also has people living in this building. And she had seen me teach that class. And anyway, a very long story short, you have to come to the island for the full story, but we're almost out of time. But very long story short, get the island under contract. It takes like 5 years to buy an island, put millions of dollars into fixing it up. And something very weird happened. And my marriage, the guy decided to become horrifically horrible and abusive in every way. And I, in a 3-month period, after having all these dreams and visions and all this stuff like starting to come true, I lost almost everything I'd ever worked for. And, the heartbreak of not being even like just basically having run down the aisle to marry somebody and then it being over so terribly and so fast. So in a 3-month period, I almost lost everything I'd ever worked for. He canceled the insurance on the island because he's like, we're not buying this anymore. 3 weeks before the greatest hurricane in the history of hurricanes, the strongest one to ever go through the Atlantic, completely annihilated the BVI. And 70% of my staff quit. 2 people just came out of the woodwork to sue me. And I didn't want to live anymore. Everybody has a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I believed the poisonous lies that I was being told. I believed in that moment that I had no value and everybody I cared about was leaving me. And this is a sign because all the da 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 da, just a bunch of lies that, again, I had somebody breathing poison into my life. And I stood on the 14th floor of my condo balcony in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was ready to jump. And I remember my foot slipping a little bit, and I had one person I could call. It was a mentor of mine, and she yelled at me, and she's like, what does it mean to gain your marriage and lose your soul? Now, I'm a very pro-marriage person. You are bigger than anything that can ever happen to you. You are called to more of this, to more than this, and you will rebuild. I don't know how, because I'd literally lost like everything, financially, staff-wise. All of it was just over. But I want to encourage somebody listening to this right now. In that moment, I really did believe I was worthless. But I'm so glad I didn't stay in that lie. One of the things that allowed me to not jump was I had a whiteboard in my living room. I have one in every single house I've ever owned. And I'd say, what is working for me? Because when you're at that level of darkness or low, all you can focus on is everything that's not working. And so I wrote out, I have legs. That's something that if I didn't have legs, I would wish I had legs. And for people that are listening to this that don't have legs, if you don't have legs, you have ears. And if you didn't have ears, you would wish every day you had ears. If you don't have ears, you wish you had eyes. You always have something. The next thing was my mom loves me. I had one person I could write on that list. And so start by finding even the microscopic things that you have the ability to be grateful for, and you can start rebuilding your life. And so I did. And, he'd canceled the contract on that. I hadn't actually closed on it yet, but I spent the next year going back and serving the British Virgin Islands and just finding a way to be a blessing. And I learned so much about disasters that I learned how fast a place can become a third world country overnight, basically. And, who are you when you lose everything? What matters at that point when you lose everything? And I got the opportunity to interview so many people. I created a documentary and a docuseries around it, trying to capture that beauty. And a year later, I got the island back under contract. And again, you have to hear the whole story on the island. And even getting it back under contract, it's not like, yay, I can't wait. Like, this is everything. Like, it was scary. I've never seen a woman do an island. And I'm not here to downplay my gender, but I didn't know, can we do this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm 29 now at the time. I think 29 when I got it back under contract. And I've never seen it done. Can it be done? How's it going to happen? I ended up having to fund it all myself because it looked like crap. It just got annihilated by a hurricane and nobody wanted to invest in that. And so I spent the next 2 years working diligently to bring it to life. I project managed the whole thing. And I was so excited. Okay, this is now one of the most beautiful and amazing islands that anybody could ever come to. And so we set our grand opening date for April 1st, 2020. If you remember what happened on that date, that's the day the whole world shut down. And so anyway, I know I'm going over time, but took almost another year because that was the day the borders closed for 9 months, and took almost another year to finally open. And in that time, I actually met and uh, fell in love with this Green Beret, this amazing person who I went on. Honestly, I'm just gonna be real with y'all. I went on like a rebound date with him just for fun because I was like, I need to go on a date with somebody who has no potential, so I can just have fun. And this guy just drank so much. I was like, this will never happen between us. But he ended up coming down to Hurricane Dorian with me, responding in the Bahamas, and came alive. And that's when I discovered the power of veterans and disasters. And I really got to know this guy, and he has the most beautiful heart, and he's wonderful, but he still had these vices that he was hanging on to. And I was like, all right, if we could just fix these vices, you could be responding to all these problems. I mean, within a couple months, he went on his first sex trafficking rescue mission. He went after witch doctors that were mutilating children for child sacrifice. And like, he has all these amazing skills. Why are you knocking yourself out of the game? And so we developed what's called the Heal the Heroes program. He eventually obviously dealt with his vices, like saw his purpose, saw his meaning. But we've basically figured out that you can plug veterans and first responders into the most austere environments in the world, and they're going to crush it because they have all the skills, the mindset, all the stuff. They just need to be able to be healed to be able to stay there. And we got married last year. I am 5 days away from having our first baby, and I'm so excited to be done with this part as well and sweet our baby. But together, what we've started as our nonprofit has rescued over 8,000 people in the last 24 months alone. And had I jumped that day, guys, for those who have ever struggled with this, had I jumped that day really believing I was worthless, there's a ripple effect that would have happened on the planet. And there's kids that would still be being trafficked right now. And so I just want you to know that life is more than that moment. And you don't know how important you are, but do not give up. You're here for a reason. You're going to die eventually anyway. So just hang on, keep pushing through, find the good, stay in the light. And that's the only way to overcome that darkness.
Britnie Turner, BritnieTurner.com. She keeps saying you have to go to the island. That's where you go, BritnieTurner.com, so that you can find information on her events. She puts on tremendous
Learn more
events.
about yourself.
Learn more. Yeah, discover yourself.
Uncover who you are.
Britney, thank you so much for joining us. I know that this is an exciting time in your life, and we are most certainly blessed to have you share your story with us, and we can't wait to see what the next chapter is. Has God told you what the next chapter is going to be?
Oh gosh. Right now we're focused on scaling, not just our family, but we are scaling this program because to me it was a test. Like, can we take specifically struggling veterans and repurpose them into, they were special operators before, but can we turn them into humanitarian special operators? And so we're doing that, and so much good has come from the island. Hopefully people can come on your next trip out there. Love to have you guys back. So many just amazing things have come through that place that I'm excited to be opening it up to the world. So thank you again for having me.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
All right, everybody. Well, every week it's almost impossible to top the previous week. Probably take next week off because this one was an absolute home run. Thank you so much, Britney. And thank you for tuning in once again to this edition of the None of Your Business podcast.